What's up? Welcome back to Cryptographics. And today, guys, we are going to be going over how to earn incentive token. We're going to be talking about liquidity providing. We're going to be talking about PulseChain launch. We're going to be going into some deep numbers, but I'm going to walk you guys through PulseX farming as much as I possibly can about what you need to know, the risks involved. Like, are there risks? How do I earn fees? Is it profitable? The whole 9 yards. So today we're going to be going through that. And before we do that, I'm going to start welcoming everybody into the chat here. Give me 2 seconds. What's up, Crypto Compassion? Good to see you. Hex can Papa. Got Justin Garner, Derek Boyd, Wakanda. Let's go, baby. Yeah, it's going to be a good one. I have some pretty cool stuff that I've been working on. So I've been thinking a lot about incentive token and just like what's going to happen there. And also trying to understand the impact of, when you provide liquidity, there's this thing called impermanent loss that I'll get to later. I'm not going to get into it like right away, but using and figuring out what impermanent loss could look like based on where you provide liquidity, what the price floor for incentive might be or for the incentive token might be. And we're going to get that way later. So before we do that, though, we have to talk about what's been going on in the ecosystem. And I'm going to bring up a tweet. Let me see if I can find it here, guys. Sorry, I realized I actually forgot to grab the tweet that I meant to have ready to go. But if you hadn't heard, there's been a little bit of an update to GitLab, the place where everyone can go and see the public updates to PulseChain. And it's starting to see like PulseChain could literally launch within the next 48 hours or so. And it's seeming, not guaranteed, but we actually might be there now. We might be at the point where we're finally ready to go. 2 years in the making, we're finally there. And let me just turn down my my mic a little bit for you guys so it's not quite as hot. I can hear it clipping. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to pull up the PulseX exchange because I can't find the tweet. Let me see if I can find it. Sorry, guys. I definitely meant to have this ready to rock, but notifications are going crazy with everything going on right now, so I'm not going to be able to find it. So let's just get right into PulseX, and let's start talking about everything to do with the farming. Oh, I don't even have the tab open. I'm on it. 2 seconds, guys. Sweet. All right. Okay. Of course, pulsex.com, app.v4.testnet.pulsex.com/swap. This is the place you obviously come to when you want to do all of your swapping on the PulseChain side. Now, farming, there's like 2 layers to this whole thing. So obviously, if you come here to earn, you go to farms, you're going to see that there's these dice pools that have like these big juicy numbers, like 131%, 919%, 1200%, 1200%. And that seems all fine and dandy, of course. Like, who's going to complain with that? But the question is like, where does this come from? How does this start? And how do you participate in this, right? So in order to understand how to participate in all this, we first have to understand what liquidity providing is. So we're going to go to the trade tab at the very top here, right next to the big PulseX logo. And I'm going to click on liquidity here. Now, in order to participate in the farms, you have to provide liquidity. Now, the question is, okay, what is liquidity? Well, liquidity in itself is just the ability to move between 2 assets. The more liquidity there is, the easier it is for you to move between 2 assets. But in this realm, what is providing liquidity? Well, that's when you provide 2 tokens to the PulseX exchange that are paired together that allow people to swap. Let's say it's PulseX or Pulse to PulseX, right? So if you want to provide liquidity, we'll talk about incentives and why you would do that momentarily. But if you wanted to do that, you would have to put up an equal dollar amount of Pulse and an equal dollar amount of PulseX. Now that makes a pair, it makes things even, and it allows you to participate in the liquidity pools to earn fees that are based off of the transactions and the volume moving through the particular pool. So there are risks though. So again, before we get into anything else, providing liquidity is simply taking 2 tokens that you own and putting an equal dollar figure into the pool in order to provide liquidity so that people can use the 2 tokens to buy and sell through either side, and you can earn fees for doing that. Now, there are risks involved, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in depth later because I really want to make sure that we get the base level done here because we're going to go off the deep end a little bit in this one. So if you're watching and you're hoping to get and you see like an hour long or 2 hour long stream by the end of this. I have no idea how long this is going to be. I'm going to go really deep here. Make sure you watch from the beginning and slowly build up, because by the time we get to the end, if you skip ahead, you're going to have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. So now that we've got the liquidity stuff out of the way, we painted the picture for the future. You can come in here and you can add liquidity. Now you type in, obviously, if let's say I want to do 55 million pulse, it's going to show me automatically what I need to put in PLSX. Now, what's going to happen is, and I don't actually know if I have anything in my wallet here, so I'm not going to be able to show you guys exactly how this is going to look, unfortunately. My bad on the prep side. But you're going to connect wallet. I'll just connect and see what I can do here. Give me 1 second, guys. Sweet. So I don't have anything in this wallet, I'm pretty sure. So what I'll do, let's go to switch to this guy, and I've got nothing in here. So all I could do at this point is I would be able to confirm. There's going to be 2 windows. You're going to confirm that you want to do this, and you're going to pay a transaction fee. And what's going to happen is you're going to get a token called PLP token. Now, this token, I don't know what the actual acronym is. I think it's PulseX Liquidity Provider Token. Basically, you get a token allocation that is representative of your share of the pool. Because if you can imagine the liquidity pool that you're providing for as the pair of tokens, you're not the only one going to be in there providing liquidity, most likely. So there's a pool of people that each have a different percentage of the total amount of tokens between the 2 token pair, right? So you can think of the pair as a pool of dollar funds, right? And you've put in a certain amount of percentage, and your percentage of the total pool might only be 1%, right? So you can think of like, if you let's say you put in 10 grand in total liquidity, and you had 1% of the pool, that would mean there's $1 million in liquidity. So you would get 1% of the total fees that go to that pool. And this is where the conversation for liquidity providing, you have to understand that there are risks involved. So you're holding on to your PLP tokens. You're thinking, okay, cool, I'm going to go do the farm thing. But you also have to consider prior to liquidity providing that you can and probably will lose a portion of your position in terms of the tokens you hold. Like if you hold 5 million PLS and 18 million PLSX and you put that into a liquidity pool, I 100% guarantee you that you will not leave that pool whenever you decide to exit with the same amount of tokens. And so if your number of tokens is important to you, then liquidity providing is not it's not the strategy for you, because you're going to have these shift. And depending on the ratio that you place your tokens in at, let's say you place your PLS tokens in with your PLSX at a 2 PLSX to 1 pulse ratio. And by the time you take your tokens out, it's 3 to 1. You're going to actually have a major shift in favor of PulseX in the tokens that you hold, and you're going to hold far less in the Pulse tokens. So I hope this is making sense. I'm going to check in with chat real quick, and let me just see what everyone's saying. I think we're good here. Cool. So back in here. Okay, so now that we understand that, we're not going to talk about impermanent loss. We'll get there eventually, because that's a big thing to talk about too. So now that you know that there's going to be some shifting going on between the tokens that you hold, and you still want to go ahead with doing this, then you confirm all this, and you get your PLP tokens. So once you have that, you can then come into the farms. You can enable the contract, and you can actually stake those PLP tokens into this pool. And this is always going to come up. This is the MetaMask feature. So I like to just press max for just testnet purposes. I don't have any, so I'm going to press 0. Insufficient funds for gas, of course. So I can't even do this. So you approve this transaction and you enable the contract. Then what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to, and I'm going to actually disconnect my wallet here so you guys can see this a little bit better. So you can actually go ahead and place the amount of PLP tokens that you have for a given pair into the pool. And when you do that, you're going to be able to earn both incentive token and fees. So now we're seeing, okay, I know I'm going to earn fees, but how much incentive token am I going to earn, and how does this all get calculated? Well, incentive is minted essentially and distributed into the pools. Let's say, and if there's 4 pools here, we can kind of do some rough math based on the assumption that there's going to be only 4 pools when PulseChain goes live and PulseX goes live on mainnet. But that's just an assumption. This all changes when the pools actually come into fruition and we see how many pools there are. So every second, 1 incentive token gets distributed to the pool. So if there's 4 pools, you get 0.25 incentive going to each pool per second, right? Now, the thing to keep in mind, though, is these percentages don't really make sense if we're thinking like that. Like, okay, how can you have 1,200% APY, especially when there's literally $13 billion in liquidity, which obviously is just testnet stuff, but there's $13 billion in liquidity in this pool, right? Like that doesn't seem right. So how exactly can that happen? Well, we are going to go to the, where is it here? Why isn't it showing me now? We're going to go click on this button here, the calculate button. And you can type in to see like an ROI. If you want to play around, you can put in like, I don't know, throw in $10,000 and see how much ROI at current rates you're gonna earn $1.8 billion over the next year. You've made it. Congratulations. But in all seriousness, we're gonna go to the bottom here and we're gonna go click on details. Now, if you look at the, I don't know if I can zoom in here a little bit. Yeah, perfect. So check this out. So it shows you the APR, including the LP rewards, and the base APR with the incentive only. So you can see that if you do some quick math, it's like just under 7 or just under 6% of the incentive token or the actual base rewards for just being a liquidity provider. And the base APR which is incentive only, is 1,231%. Now, how does that happen? Well, the farm multiplier has a 40x multiplier on it. So, for example, this is perfect here. So the multiplier represents the proportion of ink rewards each farm receives as a proportion of the ink produced each second. For example, if a 1x farm received 1 ink per second, a 4x farm would receive 40 ink per second. This amount is already included in all APR calculations for the farm. So this is how these massive potential APRs can happen here. And it's important to understand that this is when there's going to be massive incentivization and when there's actually going to be a likely play to be made, if any. But like I said, it's not for everybody, because if you have a pair of these tokens, PLS to DAI or PLS to PLSX, and you're in favor of keeping those token allocations, well, you're probably, your allocation is going to move around on you. You're going to have some sort of different variance between the two. You're going to have a different size stack on either side by the time you take it out. Chances are you're actually going to be at some sort of loss in terms of impermanent loss between the two tokens versus if you just held them, which I'll talk about later. But this is where the incentive token comes in, because, and why I think there needs to be a conversation about the incentive token and having people come over to provide liquidity, and why it's so important. Because how do you get adoption on PulseChain and PulseX and get a massive amount of liquidity if you don't have incentivization for people to participate in these farms? So here's where it's important to understand that the bonuses that we're seeing here, or these multipliers down at the bottom, the 10x multipliers and everything, why these are so important for the longevity, or for the initial phase for launch for PulseX and PulseChain. Because everybody is getting the pair of everything they hold, except for obviously ETH, because ETH isn't going to exist on PulseChain. But all the ERC20 tokens are going to get copied and be made into PRC20 tokens, and everybody's going to have an opportunity to have a liquidity provider position just like that. So, but the only reason people are going to do that, because liquidity providing is kind of scary in terms of like, people don't really understand it. People don't know. They hear there's losses or there's risks involved, but it's not clear, if it's good for them to do. So most people probably won't even do it, because it's not a lot of work, but it's a lot of know-how, and you kind of have to be a little bit savvy to do it. So how do you incentivize a bunch of people that just got free tokens to use those free tokens to make even more money? Well, at least in my opinion, if you're Richard Hart, you go ahead and you over-incentivize these pools. You make it so that way nobody can say no. You make it so nobody can look at these and say, I'm not at least tempted by that, So I think that having seen these 40x multipliers, seeing that this is possible, and the 10x and the 20x or whatever they choose for the multipliers, is a massive sign for the launch, or for the success of launch. Because the higher the incentivization here, the more likely it is that we're going to see participants in these pools, and thicker liquidity. If people are providing liquidity, obviously, to get into these pools, means that there is a little bit more stable price, right? So that means less volatility. That means more tokens bonding together through the liquidity to allow prices to move a little bit closer together. So more stability through the network. So I'm going to take a pause here. I'm going to check in with chat. Let's see here. System notes: before any of these, move some airdrop assets to a separate wallet with no commingled funds. Yeah, then learn some tax strategies. Self-directed, both IRA is an option. Let's see here. When LP with stables, it is a good idea to consider a standing sell order. That is where impermanent loss is most obvious. And this is mostly with, it is kind of like a sell order too, but it's less so with V2. With V3 liquidity, which I'm going to get into a second here, it's different because in V3 you can lose all of one side of your tokens. In V2 liquidity, you are not going to lose completely one side of your liquidity. You're going to have a massive loss on one side in terms of the number of tokens you have, but you're not going to lose completely the amount of tokens that you hold on one side. So I'm going to explain this real quick here too. So I'm going to switch my tab to the right one here. Oh, let's see. So let me go to the Hex. We can do the Hex ETH pair. So this is what we're looking at here is the Hex ETH pair, one of two, on Uniswap version 3. Now, you might be confused because you see a red bar here. You see a bunch of blue lines, and this isn't making sense. So I'm going to go through this with you right now. What you're looking at here is a combination of price and the amount of dollars that have been provided to the pair, which is Hex and ETH, at any given price increment. So left to right on this chart is the price in Hex. Price in Hex goes down to the right, and price of Hex goes up to the left. Now, these bars, the blue that we're seeing as it rises and falls, that is the amount of dollars that people can place or users can place at a given price point. And this is the main difference between PulseX's liquidity and Uniswap version 3, and why it's important to understand the difference between the two of them here. Because on Uniswap v3, and PulseX won't have this, people can place their tokens in a more narrow band. Now, why would they want to do this? Well, the ability for users to be able to do this allows them to have their liquidity concentrated and allow them to earn more fees when they concentrate their liquidity to a specific price range. So what this means is that if, though, the price goes above or below the price point that they have specified that they want their tokens to be in, they're going to lose completely one-sided tokens. So what happens, though, and this side of the equation isn't so important because we're not trying to get into like strategies and anything like that today. But what I am trying to paint here is that version 3 liquidity can be used to basically make price more stable, to stop price in its path on either as it's rising or as it's falling. And it can make it a little bit more difficult to have the price run depending on what liquidity providers want to do. But let me see here. Stop screen. Let's go back over to PulseX. If we're coming over to version 2 liquidity in PulseX, PulseX doesn't have that. When you place your tokens in a pool, it covers the entire price range. And so the way you can think of this is the price of Hex from its low of 0.00005 roughly dollars all the way up to 56 cents. This is 10,000x. That was performed on the same tech or code that's going to be in PulseX. Version 3, I would argue, does not really allow price to move as quickly. So that also means, though, that more volatility means for people participating in the farms, which is why we're talking about this, there's more volatility. There's likely to be more losses that incur in terms of the token allocation and impermanent loss. So these pools here are going to allow you to, especially if they're over incentivized with the incentive token, it may actually make sense to participate in these because you're going to get way more fees and way more incentive ink token than you normally would. So I'm going to pause here and check in to see how everyone's doing. Any questions, guys? Got 55 in here. I'd love to hear what the biggest questions you have about incentive token are as we slowly dive deeper and deeper and deeper here, because I don't want to get too deep before I lose you guys. I'll just wait a moment here. And one thing I guess we could talk about too is, I think we talked about supply. So one coming every second. So the incentive supply is going to go it should be around 31.5 million and change per year should be the token supply. But that's going to go up with these multipliers. And we'll talk about that later. But you're going to want to be, if you're looking to participate in these, you definitely want to be in them earlier versus later because the incentive is going to go down. The pools are going to thicken up. So on that note, though, give me just 2 seconds here, guys. We're going to talk about impermanent loss here because I want to really make you understand just what could happen when you're providing liquidity and why it's not for everybody. It could absolutely be. You could make a ton of money doing it possibly. You can make a ton of fees. You can make a ton of incentive token, but it's really important to understand exactly what could happen when you provide liquidity and what impermanent loss really is referring to. So I'm going to share my screen to let's see. Let's go entire screen. Let's see. No, not that one. Is it this one? I think it's this one. Cool. Now, I think you guys can see that pretty well. Cool. So what I have here, this is a chart where I'm going to go over what happens with impermanent loss. Okay. And so I'm going to zoom in. And so here's the scenario, because there's a lot of math involved, and I'm not going to go deep into the math about how all this works because I don't want to go off the deep end too far and confuse everybody. So I want to make you understand though. So what I've done here is I've created the base pool for, I made a couple assumptions. It's like, okay, let's just make a pool between PLSX and PLS and make a starting ratio like we are expecting of 1.06 to 1. So that means there's going to be a slightly more PLSX than PLS. So 1.6 to 1 is, and I did about 50 million to 47 million PulseX or PulseX to Pulse. And in this scenario, I have started both of the prices at sacrifice for PulseX and started the price of Pulse at a 1.06 ratio higher. So 3 zeros and a 106 for a total value of just under 10 grand. Now, this is just theoretical. This is just to show you what happens, mathematically speaking, when you provide liquidity and the ratio between the two tokens moves in any direction away from you. And I do have a graph here or a little chart that can show you to illustrate this, but I want to show you in numbers what happens. So what I've done here is I've just made either token kind of move up or down in price just to separate the ratio between one token to another. So it goes from 1.6 to 1 to 1.3 to 1 to 1.58 to 1, and it moves all the way to 10 to 1. And this is the price of PulseX going down and the price of Y going down. Now, the first thing I want you to note here is look at what's happening with the tokens, right? By the time we get to like 3 to 1, now instead of holding 50 million Pulse or PulseX, you know, I've got about 82 million PulseX and only 28 million Pulse. And if we go all the way down to 10 to 1, it's 150 million PulseX to 15 or 15.6 million Pulse. So there's a massive movement in the number of tokens that you're holding when it comes to Pulse and PulseX. Now, the other part of the equation that you have to understand is that, and for this, when we talk about impermanent loss, you have to understand that impermanent loss is called impermanent for a reason. It's not permanent. It's only permanent when you remove your funds out of the liquidity pool when the ratio is not close or not equal to the same ratio that you pulled the tokens out at from one token to another one. So if you were to wait from as the ratio went from 1 to 1 or 1.06 to 1 all the way to 10 to 1 and then back, impermanent loss would be next to nothing. It would basically be zero. But what we're referring to here is the difference between if you would have just held your tokens and not provided liquidity versus what the tokens are worth after removing them from liquidity due to the mathematical shifting that happened in the token allocation. And what you can see here is that the greater the movement in ratio from the starting ratio that you provided liquidity at, the greater the loss that you have versus what you would have been holding. So let's talk about the scenario for a second here. So the price of both these, I basically had them start at sack rate, and I had PulseX dip to about 30% of sack rate, and I had the price of Pulse move to basically 3 times the sack rate. And with that, the token movement is 150 to 15. And what's crazy is by the time, so basically a 10 to 1 ratio, by the time this ratio, or the ratio got to 10 to 1, there's a 40% difference between if you would have just held those tokens and let them do their thing price-wise versus providing liquidity to earn fees. You would have been down to $9,400, assuming these prices and the tokens we talked about, versus if you would have just held 50 million and 47 million, you'd have had 15.7 grand. So the loss is pretty big. Now, if we were to take this and move this all the way back down to zero, like to 1.06, you'd see a very, very small loss. So let's illustrate this here. So I want you to imagine that, I wonder if I can get a little, can I draw? Oh, I can draw. Cool. So I want you to imagine that this here is the ratio that you've provided liquidity at. So this is 1 to 1.06. And please don't mind my drawing with this mouse. It's actually really difficult. So as the liquidity or the ratio moves, and this side, we'll call this side in favor of coins, or the price going up for Pulse. So the price is going up for Pulse on this side. Man, this is actually really difficult. I don't know how people do this so easy. And obviously the opposite side is up for PLSX. Man, I'm bad at that. Anywho, don't judge me for that, please. Or do. I don't care. But what happens is if the price of PLS is going up and the ratio of tokens is shifting massively, the greater the shift in ratio, the more actual loss that you're going to see versus if you had just held the coins and not provided liquidity. So this is where we have, if we're understanding this, now we can kind of understand like what kind of incentive is going to need to be had in order for people to want to come provide liquidity in PulseX and allow for a little more stability in price, right? Because if this doesn't happen, right, no one's going to really want to provide liquidity for the most part because there's going to be such massive and permanent losses, potentially, right? And this is also why it's very important to be patient when it comes to providing liquidity, because if you're kind of erratic and you're just trying to make fees, you're trying to take advantage of things quickly, and maybe you get to, you see like a 3 to 1 ratio happen and you started at 1. Well, look at this. You're basically at a 15%, 16% loss on just the tokens alone, right? And if you have a 10% APY, that's per year, right? That's not per day, that's per year. So you actually have to have a very high incentivization for people to want to come in during times of high volatility, because going from 1.06 ratio to 3 could happen in a matter of like minutes, when we go live, just depending on how everything goes. And so with all of that, this is why it's important to understand this, because if you are going to provide liquidity and you're going to pull it out randomly, just trying to get fees, you could really hurt yourself in terms of how much you've lost, right? So it's important to understand the ratio that you're providing liquidity at, and understanding also the timing of when you're pulling it out. You don't have to understand the fees, and you also have to understand that the incentive token APR needs to be high enough that even if you have 40% loss, you're still going to be in profit, right? So that's everything that's going on with this. And I know it's complicated, and I'm going to check in with you guys here and just make sure this is making sense, because we have covered a whole hell of a lot already. And we're not even into the incentive side where we're talking about price floor, because that's more of like a discussion. That's an ongoing thing. So where do I go here? I'm going to go. Okay, let me just pause this. Morning, Shane. Good to see you again, bud. Okay, let's go. So let's see. If we use DAI PLS and PLS does a 10x, wouldn't we be left with only DAI plus fees? No. So you will hold DAI and PLS, but you will have a massive shift in the amount of tokens. So if Pulse does a 10x, that means you're going to have far less Pulse versus DAI. You're going to have a lot more DAI versus Pulse. You're not going to be completely you're not going to be completely lost though. Like you're not going to only be holding DAI. You could only be holding DAI if for whatever reason in the future we get version 3 liquidity, and you can concentrate that and you decide that, let's say the price of Pulse is like 2 zeros and a 1 or 0.2 zeros and a 1, and you provide from 0.0 to 1 to 0.009, let's say. So basically basically you almost have a 10x swing you could play with there, right? And the price of Pulse goes to 0.00 or 0.01, like a penny. You'd be left completely holding DAI because everyone would have bought out all your PLS, but we don't have version 3 liquidity. So we have version 2. What's up, Hexagon Contractor? Good to see you. Let's see here. Okay, so for small guys that want to be participating, what's the minimum value that we can do to be profitable? Well, this is where it's tough because it's not like there's a dollar figure that makes it profitable. There is an APR and an APY that makes it profitable based on what the price of incentive token is. And I'm going to get into that in a bit because I really want to make sure, and I'm probably going to actually be working stuff out still on the fly when we get there, because it's not easy to do and it's hard to calculate what the pools are going to be because it depends on how many farms there are, depends on the bonus multipliers on the farms, and how much actual incentive token is being given, right? And then it also depends on liquidity, because if there's a ton of liquidity, well, then the rewards are diluted, right? Like if there's a bigger amount of participants, if there's more participants and the same amount of rewards, then obviously the amount of rewards per person or per percentage of the pool goes down. So it's not about the amount of dollars that you're contributing or placing in the pool, but it's a number of factors, right? It's relative because if you only have $100, right, and you want to go place that in a liquidity pool, that's kind of risky. That's your entire bag, right? You don't want to do that because maybe you panic and maybe you make a mistake, or maybe the incentive token doesn't come off with a 40x multiplier and you're kind of in the negative and you lose a massive amount on that. Well, that's your whole bag. That's your whole stack. So you want to be able to go in. I mean, if we're talking with the minimum value, it's hard to say. It's really hard to say. I'll answer that as best I can in a bit. I'm going to think about that. I'll think about what the best number is, but it is a little bit more substantial. Like I don't think smaller players, I mean, on Pulse, you can actually get away with more because the fees are going to be much cheaper, for the transaction fees. So a smaller player actually could get in and still make some profit without the fees being ridiculously high. Because right now, I think I tried to check liquidity providing prices the other day just to check in, and it was like $70 for a transaction one way. And that was before the fees even spiked. So lots to consider there. What happened to single-sided staking? I heard that it is no longer happening at launch. Is that true? Single-sided staking for PLSX. It is happening. It's just going to take a little bit longer as far as my understanding, because it's going to be a bootstrapping I don't know how to say it, protocol. It's going to be a bootstrapping feature essentially for other tokens to basically use the single-sided pools to issue tokens to those who stake in the pool. So it's not like you're providing liquidity, right? You're staking in the pool and you're earning some of the tokens from coins that are new that want to distribute their tokens. And you can think of this as like a coin distribution kind of method where a new token will launch and they don't have a coin distribution method. So what they'll do is they'll go to the PulseX exchange and they will, how do I put this? They will just basically ask to, or put themselves into, I believe it's going to be the DAO. This is the part that I'm a little bit hazy on as well, in terms of what's exactly going to happen here, because I haven't seen a whole lot be talked about since a lot of shifts going on. My understanding is, and this is possibly going to change, is that there's going to be a vote on which tokens are going to go to the single-sided stakers, and that token then will be trickled into the pool on a daily basis until the until the campaign or whatever you want to call it has been finished. And then that pool will end because it'll probably be for a specific amount of time. They usually are. So there'll be a time period where there's going to be a token allocation that goes out. You can earn the tokens, pull your PLSX out. You don't have to worry about any kind of loss. So PulseX single-sided staking is still happening. My thoughts on it are that it's probably not going to be incredibly lucrative. Like, you're not going to earn hundreds of %, I don't think, with PLSX in the single-sided staking pools. I mean, you might, who knows? Like, it's impossible to say. And any sort of speculation is wrong to various degrees, just depending on what happens. But I don't think it's safe to say that it's going to be super lucrative. So it's a nice place where if you have PLSX, you can place your PLSX in a pool without worrying about any kind of loss that's happening. And you know that the code's safe because it's been with PancakeSwap since years ago, and PancakeSwap has been flawless. So it's a good way to put your token somewhere and just earn a little bit of extra yield without having much risk at all. So it's happening though. And let's see here. Hey, thanks, Jake. Appreciate that, buddy. Great content information. Thanks, Cryptographics. I appreciate you, man. Let's see here. Let's go a year world cruise after launch and then come back and we are rich. I mean, if someone wants to pay, I'm in. But until then, I got work to do. I love the idea, though. MA, what's up, man? Cryptographics, morning to you. Thanks for being here. Piston broke 5555. Great program. Thank you. Hey, you're welcome. Click to view. If I get USDC ERC20 copy as airdrop, I can bridge it over to Ethereum network. Yes is the answer, but it's not. It's different than your. So what you're, and tell me if I'm wrong here, if I'm getting this wrong. Actually, give me 2 seconds, guys. I just want to have a quick drink of water. Okay. So when the stable coins get copied over, the problem is the only reason stable coins work, right, is that you have a entity that has a reserve, right? Well, in the case of the centralized like USDC or USDT, right, you have these stable coins that have a reserve, and the reserve is 1-to-1 for the stable coin. So the value is backed, right? It's backed by something. It has a value that is backed by the dollars that have been put into the to the entity, right? So they have a vault of reserve. But what happens is when these tokens are copied over to the Pulse chain, well, now you've just duplicated the entire supply in a new network, and there's nothing backing that whatsoever. There's nothing backing those new tokens. So they essentially have no value, right? Unless someone steps in, like MA is saying, and backs the stablecoin. But really, for USDC, for those tokens, there's probably going to be no value for those. There'll be a new token because multi-chain, and we're not going to get into that right now, but supposedly PulseChain is going to have a USDC stablecoin, but that's for another day. So what's likely to happen here is imagine there's no, like, if there's any token this can happen to, right? If there is deemed to be no value for that token, nobody wants the token because it's not good for anything else. Like, imagine for a second that Hex got a copy on PulseChain, but there was no staking, right? What do you think is going to happen? If the staking is completely locked out, no one's allowed to stake on PulseChain, what's going to happen to the token? Well, the utility is completely gone out the window, right? The narrative about store of value is completely gone out the window. So people are just going to dump the token into oblivion, right? Because they're just going to try and cash out for as much as they can before it hits zero and then get out. Same thing with these stable coins that are not going to have anything backing them. People are going to essentially try and get out of them as quick as possible, so that way they can get some value out of it, but it's not going to last long. And so if you are thinking of holding USDC for the airdrop, it's not the best strategy. If you're thinking of bridging back over, you might be able to get some value, but it's probably going to be pennies on every dollar. Like, it's not going to be worth very much. So it's really important to understand that. That's why stable coins aren't good for the copy. If you're holding stable coins, they're safest because they're going to retain the dollar value in the midst of like a lot of volatility in terms of even Hex or like ETH or any other ERC20 token. But yeah, it's a whole other conversation. Let's see here. Unless the stablecoin is wrapped ETH version, possible to have value if people make LP. And this is a different conversation. Exactly. So this is a great point. So now, if though you have the Ethereum USDC, you will actually be able to bring it over or buy, like MA is saying, a wrapped version on the PulseChain side, meaning the USDC that lived on Ethereum is been bridged over and, has been brought over to the PulseChain side. That is backed. So that will have a value. And that can be basically traded for, like, let's say you have your Pulse and you want to get a stable coin on the Pulse side. Well, you can go to a wrapped, so an Ethereum-based stable coin, bridge it over, and then you could cash out that way. So those are the stable coins that are actually going to work. So great point, MA. Great point. Frosty Dog. Let's launch. It's soon, man. Soon. Very, very soon. Okay. Where were we here? Okay. Before I go, I know we were talking about the impermanent loss. If you are understanding it, put a 1 in the chat. If you have questions, now is your opportunity before I start going in to everything else about if you have any more questions. Okay. I'll give it a minute or so before we go on, a little bit less. And then we're going to talk about the incentive token and possible pricing for the incentive token. One. Okay. Crypto Compassion. Yeah, you got her. You understand the impermanent loss. 220 million wallets will have a copy on PLSX. Very excited to see the movements and opportunities. It's going to be wild. Yep. It's really cool. No sweat, brother. No sweat. You got a 1. I've seen 1s. I think everyone's kind of got that. I know you're going to understand it. Yeah, it seems like everyone else has got it though, for the most part. But one thing that's important to consider, guys. So let's talk for a second about what's likely to happen when PulseChain launches, or not what's likely, but some possible scenarios that we could see that may be likely. So when it comes to the PulseChain launch, everyone's talking about how, or not everyone, I shouldn't say, because I don't want to paint everyone in the same picture or with the same brush, but there's a large sentiment or heavy sentiment that PulseX is gonna, or Pulse or PulseX and all these things are going to start to run. They're going to do some serious price performance out of the get-go, right? Well, I'm not sure I buy that, because everything we have thought so far that's going to happen, the opposite has happened. Everyone's thinking price is going to go up. Well, why wouldn't price go down? You know, it depends on liquidity. If there's not a lot of liquidity, then large players can't buy. And large players buying makes price go up. Also, large players selling really can hit price. So volatility could be very high when it comes to the launch. And depending on where price launches at, that could cause us to have even more volatility. So it's not a very good position for liquidity providers necessarily, right? And that's also why it's kind of like a circle. There's no liquidity because there's volatility, and there's volatility because there's no liquidity, right? It's this kind of circular thing that goes on. And so you have to, if you're going to provide liquidity, you want to know that you're providing liquidity at a ratio that is likely to hold, right, between two tokens. So let me go to my chart here. Let's see. Okay, let's get it here. So let's say we know, and we do know, that the launch ratio should be around 1.6 to 1. PLSX to PLS, right? So, but let's say you and I know, and which we don't, and I'm throwing a number. This isn't what I think. This isn't any sort of speculation here. This is just a number because it's different than the one that we're going to launch with. And I'm just going to pick one here, right? So let's say that we all agree that the price of Pulse is going to settle to the PulseX is going to be a ratio of about 3 to 1, roughly, right? Let's say we agree on that. Well, if price is starting at a 1 to a 1 point, or 1 to 1.06, right? Almost 1-to-1 ratio. If we provide liquidity here and then we wait to this point, we're going to suffer an impermanent loss between 11% and 15%, roughly speaking. So that means we have to make sure that we earn at least that over that period, especially if we're expecting it to settle. Like, who knows, right? If the price comes all the way down to, in terms of ratio, like 10 to 1 and then back up, I mean, you really got to wait for one. And for two, you got to make sure that the rewards are going to compensate you for, and the fees are going to compensate you for this loss here. So instead of doing that, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because, okay, if you expect the price or the ratio to roughly fall between, let's say, even 3 and 2 to 1 or 2 and 3 to 1, why not wait a moment? Why not wait till everything settles? Unless you're very, very confident that the ratio or that the incentive token that you're going to earn is so astronomically high, you can go and maybe confirm that in PulseX. But short of knowing that incentive token is going to be stupidly high, maybe it's better to wait a moment and let things get a little closer to your target ratio. And that way, if you think the ratio over time, no matter what it does in terms of volatility short term, eventually it's going to get to that ratio of what you expect. And that's why you set it there, right? So that way the loss is lower, right? However, like I was saying, if the fees on PulseX, oh yeah. So quick thing, shout out to Sloth. You inspired me for this. I've been reading this this sheet that came from an amazing course that both Access Alive and Sloth both put on a few weeks back. And this diagram is great. So Sloth, shout out to you, brother. So Emma, you think it's 5 to 10. So, which is interesting, right? So, and let's use that as an example here. So let's say you provide liquidity at 1.06 to 1. And then you wait to 6, right? Or then it settles at 6. Well, then you're basically losing 30% of token allocations versus if you would have just held. So you have to make sure that the rewards that are happening on PulseX, that these rewards here are going to net you at least 30% ROI by the time you pull your funds out. And so there's a lot that goes into it. It's not quite simple. Like I'm painting this as kind of difficult and painting this with the nuance that it needs to be, because for those of you that do want to participate in this, you have to understand why things move the way they do. And you have to understand all the metrics to understand whether it's worth it or not, right? And obviously with a 1,200% APY, right, that's pretty high. And I haven't broken this down to see exactly what that means on a day-to-day basis, but I believe that's like 3 or 4% a day. So over the course of a month, that could be like 90% in a month, right? So if you're pulling your liquidity out over the course of a month, you could still be up a whole hell of a lot. So now let's go to this guy again, and let's start to talk about the incentive token price, because this is where things get interesting. And I'm still working this out. So these numbers aren't perfect, but I'm playing with this because what I'm trying to understand now is I'm trying to understand what the price floor for incentive token might be based on the impermanent loss that could happen here, right? So let's say, and for this, we kind of have to pick an average of an impermanent loss that happens, right? This is when people go in and they're like, okay, I'm expecting to lose a little bit here, right? Just with impermanent loss, but I want to make that up in fees. So let's say that about 10 to 15% is on average what the impermanent loss is going to be, right? So where is it here? What I have here is if we take, now how I've done this too is I've gone in and you do the math, and PL or incentive token is issued at 1 incentive per second, right? And that's total. So it's split between the 4 pools. And so that means each pool is getting 0.25 incentive per second distributed to the pools. Now, what we can see here is that there's obviously the multiplier, which is 10x. So 10x multiplier on 0.25 ink per second is 2.5 incentive per second. And some of these, or 2 of these, have 10x and 2 of these have 40x. So the one assumption that we have to make for this math is that the farms are going to be the same and the incentive rewards are going to be roughly the same as well. I don't think it's going to be accurate. I think there may be more, there may be less, and we don't know what this incentive is going to be. But what I'm trying to figure out here and see roughly where price based on something like this could start, right? And what the high and the low price could range from depending on losses, right? Because the way I'm seeing this is when people make enough incentive token, right, where they're massively in profit, they're going to start selling. So where is that floor price where it doesn't actually make sense for people to sell anymore? And so what I'm kind of finding, if we take the math of 4 pools, 2 of them have 10x bonus on them, and 2 of them have 40x bonus on them, we're actually having an interesting price range here where from a 10% loss to a 20% loss, we could see a floor. Now, I'm not saying that this is like a price prediction. This is just based on like the math that I'm seeing. And this may not be completely correct here, but this is what I'm trying to go for, is trying to figure out what the base price might be based on these incentivizations that we're seeing here. If the incentives change, like it's just 10x bonuses or there's no bonuses, then I don't see these prices holding up at all. This is just based on what's on testnet right now. And this could be adjusted for to look for what's happening on mainnet when PulseX actually goes live. So I'm seeing, based on the math in the pools, ranging from 62 cents to $1.30 for a single incentive, somewhere around there. So if we figure out, basically it's like the average price will be like $1 at 15%. So 60 cents to $1.30 would be, if the math equaled what we're doing right now on testnet. So 4 pools, 2 of them are going to be 10% or 10x, and 2 of them are going to be 40x, then yes, should be roughly around 62 cents to $1.30. Let's see here to make sure I'm not missing anything. I know I'm going kind of quick here. Oh, I still have the, wow, I'm way behind here. Damn. Okay, I'm going to pause for a sec. Yeah, I don't think he'll have limit orders on right away either. I think it's going to be a little bit. Let's see. Oh, really? Oh, it's sweet because I'm having access on tomorrow. And that's why I wanted to get this out, because I wanted to start the conversation and I wanted to have access on tomorrow and talk to him about a lot of what we're doing on this stream. Crypto Gains Club, good to see you. Good. Let's see. Just going to go through all this. What are you referring to there, Sloth? Oh, are you talking to MA? Okay, yeah, I got you. That's what we're learning. Okay, yeah, cool. Sweet. So now let's go back to the sheet here. Okay. There's my crazy math sheet. So again, the baseline price we would see would be, for the floor, would be somewhere between 60 cents and $1.30. If it's 15%, well, we're going to have 15% average impermanent loss. Well, then we're probably going to see about $1 roughly for incentive if we have the same parameters, which is kind of cool because that's assuming, everyone is selling it down to its bottom, which means that's the baseline, really. So you could see price go much higher than that. It really depends, which is pretty cool. And then if we go further, let's say the average, like people are really getting hit in losses because they provided liquidity at something that they thought was really going to be a good ratio and it really moved on them. Well, then the price could go as high as something like 3.6 or $3.60. But I think that's getting a little bit out there because I think the average is going to probably be somewhere around this range here, probably a little bit closer to 60 cents. But also, this changes drastically depending on where this ratio launches. Like right now, I have the price of both Pulse and PulseX at basically just over sacrifice price. If we launch everything we'll take off a 0, so 10x higher, then all of this changes. All this drastically changes. So now we're at the 10% loss of $6.22. And then we're also at a 20% loss for impermanent loss, leading us to around 13. So we're on $10 per incentive, right? So again, it's not that these prices are important, but it's cool because we can actually kind of get a gauge for what the incentive token could be worth based on both impermanent loss and the prices of both a given asset that's in the pool, right? So it's pretty cool. I wonder how this is going to turn out. I have no idea, but it depends on what you think. Like, I'd love to know in the chat, if you guys are watching this, what do you think that Pulse and PulseX are going to launch it? Are we going to be at 10x? Are we going to be at sacrifice rate? Let me know. And what I'll do is I'll adjust based on what everyone's saying into the sheet, and we'll see roughly what the incentive token could be worth. And again, this math is still rough, so it's probably going to be some refining, but it's just cool to look at this as like, it looks like we can actually derive a value as a floor price for incentive, which I didn't think we could do before, so we could see possibly like a derived value. So I'll give it a sec here. Wait for anyone that wants to comment. Yeah, draw it again. 10x to 100x. I like where your head's at. All right, so we got 10x. So I'm at 10x right now. I'll wait for a couple more comments to come in, and we'll see how everything is looking. Definitely 10x to 100x. Okay, so we got 2 for 10x. I think 10x is probably safe. I'm leery of providing point. Okay, yeah, we could do. Okay, screw it. Why don't we play with 100x? I haven't done that before. Let's just see. Let's just mess around here. It's not for reals anyway, so let's try it. Okay, so let's do penny for PulseX and 1.06 penny starting for Pulse. That means if that was the case, incentive token at around 10% loss average would be somewhere around like $62. If we're assuming there's a lower loss, it lowers drastically. So I want to paint this picture real quick. So the reason why these numbers are here, you could think of these like the higher the volatility or the risk of volatility, the risk of loss, the higher the price incentive needs to be in order for it to be profitable. The more stable that these pools are in their price, the lower incentive can be for its baseline price, because more stability means that there's less movement, there's less losses. Any fees that you're earning are making you go in profit that much quicker, right? So the more the loss, the higher the price for incentive in order to make sure that you're still in profit. Now, again, this is based on 2 40x multiplier pools and 2 10x multiplier pools. And this is, 10x multiplier pools. In order to get these, this is going to change. But what we can do is we can see roughly how this is going to affect the prices for everything. So again, 10x whale, I reckon we'll dump at the start. Yeah, 10 to 20x, buy and burn. Yeah, exactly. More than okay with that. I don't think that's how it's going to go, but it's cool to see, like I said, that we can possibly even see how a floor could be generated for incentive token based on, the losses that people could see. And because, people could take their positions out, right, to check on their pulse. But I guess it's hard too, because, if people don't know what their losses are, like let's say you provide liquidity at like maybe a tenth of a penny. So 2 zeros and a 1, so 0.001, right? And it goes up 10x and the ratio goes way out of whack, right? You could seem like you're with the price, it could feel like you're in profit, right? Like maybe you started with 10 grand and now you got 15, right? But what happened was maybe you don't realize that you left another 40% on the table versus just holding. So this is where things get weird, where I'm not sure how much of this is going to be translatable, but I think it's interesting because people will realize what's happening at some point, and they'll want to make sure they're being profitable, right? So there's going to be, for those people that are participating in this, they're going to be calculating to a degree. I would hope that this is going to be there needs to be some kind of calculation there. So that's what this is all about. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen here for a sec. Okay. We've gone for an hour on incentive token, and I'm going to stop beating that dead horse. If you guys have any other questions on that note on Pulse or on the incentive token, I'm going to leave it there. If not, and then we can move on to, maybe we can still talk about liquidity, because that's interesting. I've got some thoughts on V2 versus V3 liquidity, Hart's Law and Pulse launch and Hex prices and all that stuff. So we can go into that if you guys want as well. Crypto 420. What y'all think PLSX will drop at? Man, we're trying to figure that out. I don't know anyone that knows, to be honest. I mean, the ratio is going to be almost 1-to-1 for Pulse to PulseX, so there's that. But other than that, man, I don't have a clue. I don't have a damn clue. And let me see. I just got to check one thing, guys. Give me 1 second here. I don't think I turned on a couple settings here. Cool. All right. So PulseX, well, let's talk about why prices would start anywhere. Yeah. This is okay. And so now let's get into the Pulse Chain strategy side of things. Let's talk about what exactly could happen. So it seems to me, and I'm going to pull up something, and I'm not going to tell you my thoughts. I'm just going to leave it there, and you guys can take for yourself from it what you want. So let's talk about Hex for a second here. Now, here's the Hex chart, right? Now, the thing about every time there was going to be a launch, right? We thought like this area here, that was supposed to be launch. That was mid-May last year. And then we got wrecked, right? And then there's a little bit of excitement here because of Icosa, wrecked. And then we thought, oh, maybe we're going to launch here. Nah, no. And so this time we got the same thing where we thought, okay, well, maybe we'll launch here. Nope. That was V4, boom, down. And then this here was this tiny little pump for ants is our excitement currently for PulseChain or for Ethereum Hex getting copies on Ethereum. So why I'm saying this is because every time one of these happened, I'll call them sell the news events. The opposite of what the narrative was happened. It's like, oh, we're going to go up to 15. We're going to go up to 20 cents. Nope. Oh, we're going to go up to 30 cents. Nope. We went down. So let's talk about why it's important though. And we can actually use that to maybe understand how things might play out. So if the price of Hex starts, or on PulseChain, starts too high, that could be sell pressure. But there's no guarantee that the price of Hex or PulseX could start high anyway. So let's say that the price of Hex is not going to start at parity on PulseChain. Let's just like say that as our baseline assumption here. And it's an assumption, but we're going to use it just for this argument, right? Let's say everything starts lower. Let's say everything starts at SAC rates. And let's say also that, let's see here. I need a box. I need a rectangle. Stat. And he's text. And text. Let's say that the ratio of Hex to PLS is about 40-1. And the price of Pulse starts at sacrifice rate. So 0.0001. Let's just say this for example, right? That would mean that Hex would start at 0.004, right? This is making sense here. And let's just make this nice and yellow so it stands out. So now that we can see this, so this would be if we launched and we had these ratios the same, it's 0.004, which means that this little Hex would need to go all the way if we're hoping for parity one day, right? Means we'd have to go from here all the way. We'd have to do like a 14x in order to get up to parity. So that's a long way to go up. That's a big ask initially, when there's going to be probably higher demand for PLS and possibly PLSX. Possibly there's still going to be a high demand for Hex, I think, but that's a lot to ask, So here's what actually makes sense to me. There's far less desire, it seems, in overall sentiment for Ethereum Hex. I mean, Ethereum gas fees are just stupid right now. So, I mean, like it sucks to end a stake. It's hundreds of dollars for a small stake. We're going to see a lot of these stakes bleed out. So at least temporarily, the sentiment for Ethereum Hex, at least in my opinion, is going to dwindle. And because everyone's excited about PulseChain, we're going to see a migration over there to some degree. I don't know exactly what's going to happen there, but what could be very good is that instead of relying on little P Hex to start way down here and go all the way up, it could be easier if both of them came towards each other. So if Ethereum Hex came down, let's even say to here. So it's a 56% drop, right? And the PulseChain Hex came from point, so where we said it was going to go, all the way up to here. Now it's only a 5x. That seems more achievable to me, instead of going for a 14x right out of the gate, assuming that that's even where it's going to launch. And at this point, this kind of brings them together where then the parity could be a little bit lower, and this could be like our double bottom, if you will. Because we got 3 cent here. It could be a triple bottom almost. Because if you look at most charts, you look at the Ethereum chart, most charts that have a second cycle that's quite successful, you come down for a while, right? You come up, you go down, go sideways for a bit, and then eventually accumulate and go. So let me see here. So here's why that's cool though, because if we come down, right, we give it an easier chance to find parity, right? And then at that point, this is when things are probably settled. If this actually happens, things are going to be less volatile. Things are going to settle a little bit, at least in my opinion. And this would be a good opportunity here for liquidity to be injected in large quantities to bond not only the PulseX and PulseChain Hex prices together, but then to bond the Ethereum Hex price as well, right? So this is interesting, because when you bond liquidity, basically you're thickening the liquidity the most between these pairs. And when one of those tokens rises in price, it'll lift all of them with it. So this could be perfect though, because you're bringing everything down on the Ethereum Hex side. Everything is stabilizing. And then next thing you know, where is it here? Where is it? Hello. Then we start here and we end up doing this. And then on this run, everything gets pulled up together because liquidity has been thickened so much, right? And this is where I wanted to get into with PulseX. Where is it here? Let's see here. Where is I'm just gonna switch tabs here, guys. One sec. Present. So when it comes to the PulseX liquidity, actually, I'm gonna share a different part of my screen here. Let's talk about liquidity for a second. So the reason why originally we were talking about V3 liquidity was because V3 can be added in concentrated quantities. So you can specify a price range, and that effectively holds price up more the more you concentrate it. But if it goes out of the price range, you lose more of your token. You lose all your tokens on one side. The thing with PulseX is PulseX doesn't have that. It works on infinite scale, so it never runs out of tokens if you provide liquidity. And so it is more volatile. Price can move faster on the PulseX side. So let me go back and let me get the other thing up. Share screen. So here's the thing. If we've tied Ethereum Hex to PulseChain Hex, which is tied to PulseX, which is tied to Pulse, and everyone wants the big three, right? They're going to lift up. And then even if you have the PulseChain Hex rising at a little bit of a faster rate than Ethereum Hex, well, then you have an opportunity called arbitrage. And what that is where if there is 2 points where you can buy essentially the same thing, and one of them is higher than the other, well, you could buy that asset on the cheaper side and sell it on the other side to make a profit. And if there's enough participants in that, you can essentially create like an equilibrium where if one rises above the other one, then people sell that for the other one to buy that to gain a position back and forth and make a profit off that. And that creates equilibrium. So even if liquidity, or even if the Hex, PulseX, and PulseChain price are ripping and it's kind of pulling away from Ethereum Hex even a bit, there's an arbitrage opportunity there, and I think that's important to recognize and understand that if parity even hits one time, I think we're locked. I think arbitrage is going to keep us there. I think Hart's Law is going to keep us there, and especially if a ton of liquidity is injected. So that's super important to understand. I'm just checking with chat here. Aha. You picked this up. Nice. Yeah. I like to look at the chart opposite. So don't buy when it goes up and do buy when it goes down. So if you're looking at these candles here, you'll probably notice that I have green on the way down and red on the way up. This is how you trick yourself. You see opportunity on the way down and you can just watch and wait on the way up. There you go. Nope. So I had this right. So this is based on if PulseChain launched its sacrifice rate and the ratio is about 40-1, which is roughly, super roughly, somewhere around what we're expecting the ratio to start at based on the liquidity of ETH and Hex at the moment, then we should basically start Hex at 0.004, assuming when the bridge goes live that ratio hasn't moved, right? So that was actually correct, was what I was being deliberate in saying that. Worldwide, 1873. Thank you for the $1.99. So should I sell my EHEX now? There's no correct answer to that. It depends on what you want to do. It is completely based on strategically what you're hoping for. If you want a one-to-one copy on the PulseChain side, because for whatever reason, then do not sell your Hex. Now, again, this is not financial advice. This is just, I'm going to paint the picture of like why you would want to sell or why you wouldn't want to sell. And really, I mean, I don't see for most people the upside to trying to gain this whole system. Because look, if you sell your Hex for something else right now, right? Let's say you put it into USDC. Well, you're not getting the copy for one. And two, you're going to play the game of trying to get an asset like Pulse or PulseX or something else, or maybe even PHEX, and betting that the dollars that you can get on now or that you can hold now and put into the PulseChain ecosystem are going to be more beneficial than just holding your Hex, getting the copy, and doing something with that, right? So you have to know exactly what you're going to do, and you have to know why you're doing it in terms of like, am I doing something that's going to be more profitable than just holding Hex, right? And at that point too, you're kind of trading too. So like you're putting more risk on the table. So yes, sure, you can always strategically think of ways to utilize like to getting out of Hex and maybe sitting in USDC or whatever, but like most people are going to mess that up. Most people are going to mess that up, unfortunately. So I don't recommend doing it. You know, if you're going to do that, you got to know why. You got to know the upside that you're expecting. You got to, you know, why you're expecting that upside. You got to know the possible risk for downside. You got to know your entry point. You got to know so much. And so if you already hold Hex, you need to consider all that. I don't recommend either of them necessarily, but I do recommend doing less in most cases for most people. Now, this is obviously up for you to decide what's best for you, but yeah, I'll leave that there. Let's see. Yeah, picking projections and downside. That's exactly what I'm doing here. Will PLSX dump first? Do you think I need to get more PLSX with USD? Have PLS and not touching it. Right. So PLSX dumping first. Let's talk about why that would happen, because it's what I think is less important, what I think is less important in my opinion than why I think it or why anyone thinks what they think. You know, that tells us a lot more than just like, I think it's going to go down. So the reason why I believe that PLSX would be the first one to go down between Pulse and PulseX is because most people don't value it the same as Pulse, at least not initially. There's a lot of wallets or a lot of users that participated in the sacrifice for PulseX that just wanted something to participate in the launch to get more Pulse. And some people went in quite heavy because of that. It's also been 2 years and there's a lot more people that sacrifice for PulseX than for Pulse. So if you think about the amount of funds that are in PulseX and the amount of people combined that are in PulseX that didn't get into Pulse, there's a lot more reason to sell PulseX than Pulse, I think, at least. When even comparing those two metrics. I mean, there's obviously the 2 years that people are waiting for Pulse, but you also don't have the amount of people that are in it, right? And you don't have the sentiment that people had originally when they were in Pulse or sacrificing for Pulse, where they want to sacrifice to get Pulse to swap for something else. No one was thinking that, right? So I personally do think that PulseX is going to see a little bit more downside initially than Pulse. And I don't know what that's going to be. You know, maybe we just go like right to like maybe 1.5 or 2.5 to 1 and stay there, but it could go way past. We could see a big dip. And I don't know ultimately, but if I'm thinking about it, that's what I'm thinking, and that's why I'm thinking about it that way. So let's see here. Jose Estrada says, what if EHEX pumps 3 to 4x at launch time and then dumps? That might happen. What do you think? Well, I do think that you're close to something similar to what I'm thinking. I actually don't even know that it makes sense for Hex to even pump right now. I mean, like, of course I want Hex to pump, you know, and maybe it does. Because of course I want it to. I want the whole ecosystem to do well. But the question I'm asking is like, okay, why on earth would people buy Ethereum Hex right now? And ultimately it's hard. You know, it's challenging on Ethereum because for a lot of people, the gas fees are extremely high, right? Extremely high. So for smaller purchases, doesn't make sense. For ending stakes, small stakes, doesn't make sense. So why not wait till PulseChain? This is the sentiment I'm imagining that a lot of people have, right? This isn't my sentiment. This is what I'm trying to understand as why people think what they think and why they'll act in a certain way, right? So this is down the lane of why I think people would not get Hex right now, or maybe even dump their Hex, right? So if there's not much sentiment in favor of buying Hex because of externalities like gas, or gas costs really are the big thing. It's the main driver away, right? And that PulseChain Hex is going to be better for staking. It's going to be cheaper fees, and everyone kind of wants to migrate there. Well, unfortunately, that leads me to believe that, well, maybe Ethereum Hex doesn't really have any upside in the interim. Like here, look at this. So I remember, and I even got caught by this too. Like I did know that there was going to be some kind of buy the rumor, sell the news event with this event here. But even I thought this was going to go way up to like 18 cents. I thought we're going to end up here, right? So this grabbed me, and this is the second time it happened. And so now, you know, I'm very acutely aware of, we think it's going to hit here. Well, it probably won't. When everyone thinks one thing, it usually doesn't quite happen that way, or goes in a different direction completely. And so everyone saw it hitting here and we went down, right? So this is kind of what I'm seeing here. Everyone's still thinking like, oh, we might pump at launch. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not so sure, man. And honestly, I think it's actually for the health of the ecosystem, I think it's actually beneficial if we come down here. Now, it's going to take some time for that to happen because, like I showed you on info.uniswap.org, there's a lot of liquidity. And so it's going to take some time to get through that. So it's going to be a slow process, and it'll give PulseChain Hex some time to level up and move up towards the Ethereum Hex while Ethereum Hex comes down. And I think that's actually great because at least in terms of, I can imagine Richard Hart, and for what he wants, I can see him really wanting the people to benefit most for the people who believe and not for the traders. And the traders are the people who are trying to take advantage of this whole situation. So why reward the traders when you could get rid of them and then allow the people that have believed in the ecosystem and that are going to hold through thick and thin, right? Why not reward them the most? How do you do that? Get rid of the people who don't believe as much and are trying to take advantage of the situation, and then allow the people who do believe to stay and be rewarded most. I'm not saying he's necessarily trying to game everything, but it could happen. And this is why I'm saying what I'm saying here. You know, I'm not wishing price go down. I'm wishing price go directly to $5 million. Like, why would I not? So, but I know it's not going to happen, you know, so come on, man. Here we go. Cool. So let me just read some comments here. Yeah, it's possible, like you're saying. I mean, it's just a ratio example. Like this is all just based off of a predetermined ratio, roughly for ETH to Hex, which is then converted after the AMM fixer bot comes in to Pulse to Hex, and then assuming a price point of sacrifice rate. If Pulse launches at 10x the sacrifice rate, Well, guess what? Hex is going to launch at like 4 cents then, right? So got to consider that as well. I'm just speculating based on data and making assumptions, but I don't know. Ultimately. Let's see. I will buy Hex when BTC costs 11K. Fair enough. Might be waiting a bit. Although I don't know what's going to happen in the interim here, man. There's so much happening in the macro environment with banks and everything that's like, I just don't know. There's just so much going on. I don't know how to keep track of it, and just got to be patient and wait. Just try not to be too speculative. Let's see here. Oh yeah, she's gonna run. She's gonna run. There we go. Thanks for pinning the picture for both selling and holding now. I'll hold for now and get my copy. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. And just think about it. Just make sure you understand why you're doing anything. That's what I'm trying to paint here. It's not that there is a better or worse decision, but I'm just trying to make sure that you understand there's so much more that goes into it than just like, oh, should I just do this? Should I just move into USDC or should I just stay into Hex? It's like, well, each have a trade-off, and you have to understand both equally, at least in my opinion. MA says, I would get PLSX if it dumps early, wait for it to pump and swap back for PLS. This is another strategy. Now, let's talk about like why you would want, like if PLSX dumps, like, so what, right? Like, why would you get PLSX just because it's going down? Well, it depends, right? Let me paint the picture here. I'm going to go back to my right tab. And let's just move right out of the way. All right. Let's just, okay, no. Okay. So let's say that both Pulse and PulseX, because we know they're going to start at 1.0 or 1 to 1.06 ratio, right? So you can think about the starting point, and I'm going to change this color here to something a little brighter. So, and let's do, yeah, it's nice and tick. So we've got the two starting points. So this is the Pulse starting price. This is the PulseX starting price, right? If you think that both Pulse and PulseX are going to end up here, let's call this $1, right? Let's call this $1, and let's go to 28. Yeah, it's looking good. Let's call this price $1 here, right? This is our target. If you think both of these are going to hit $1, but you know that this one is going to go down first to here and then go up, well, which one are you going to choose? Right? Like, why would you choose the one if you think both of them are going to do the same? Why would you choose the one that goes up first instead of the one that goes down first when they're both going to end up at the same place? That's what you got to think about here. And I'm not saying that Pulse and PulseX are going to do this or PulseX is going to perform the same, but you have to think about this. It's like, what price range do you think it's roughly going to hit? Why do you think that? And do you think Pulse is going to launch or go up on launch? Or do you think PulseX is going to dump? Or do you think they're going to be the same? Do you think, is P-Hex in this mix? Is P-Hex going to perform roughly the same as well? Because like I said in a recent video, if you have if you get your free copy of PulseChain Hex from your Ethereum Hex, well, if you think Hex is going to perform half as good on both chains combined, then basically you need both Hexes to do half as good combined to keep up with Pulse and PulseX. Like, if you think Hex is only going to do 50x and you think Pulse is going to do 100x, but you got your copy of Hex and you think you expect parity from both chains on the Hexes, well, then Hex only needs to do a 50x on both chains for you to see the same gains as Pulse, right? So there's a lot to consider here. How long will it take to mainnet to sync with V4? I mean, I don't know the answer. From what I'm hearing, it might be like 48 hours or so. Let's see. I'm new to crypto. How can I buy some of this PulseX? You're gonna have to. I think I made a few videos, but basically you're gonna have to wait until PulseChain launches, and there are no PulseX tokens available anyone that is on, if you see any on Ethereum or any other chain, they're a scam. Do not participate in them. They're going to take your money. Wait to go to PulseChain Mainnet when you can see on the PulseX exchange, the PulseX token, and make sure it's that one. And what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to bring in some funds from a centralized exchange to your wallet, or you're going to have to on the exchange get ETH or USDC or something, bring that to your wallet, and then you're going to have to bridge that over, and then you're going to be able to buy PulseX. To accumulate T shares, pre-copy, exactly. I can't see limit order feature on V4. Are they going to add that on mainnet? At some point, I believe they are, but it's not necessarily coming right away. There's too many traders in Hex, especially the millionaire in Hex. Been DCA in the Hex, prefer to wait to buy PLSX deep. Yeah, to each their own. Everyone's got a different. Oh, did you? Yeah, everyone's got a different thesis and why they want to invest in something else. And ultimately, I hope your strategy works out. Hope that works. I got to your comment, my man. I definitely got it. About 48 hours is what I'm thinking. But that's just from what I'm hearing. I ultimately don't know. I'm just going off of what I hear on the street or the interwebs, but we'll see. I really don't know, man. So where do you see the Hex price going in the next 12 months? 12 months would take us to next spring, summer. I would be shocked if we're only at our all-time high by then, but could happen. It could be higher than that, but I think all-time high is like fairly reasonable the next 12 months because we'll be kind of deep into the bull. Well, just starting into the bull, I should say. Well, we definitely should be like a few months into the bull. So I'd be shocked if we weren't at least at the all-time high by then. But don't take this, not a price prediction. That's just me thinking out loud. Let's see here. Yeah, thank you. Thumbs up, cheers. Yeah, guys, there's 160 of you in here. If you'd be so kind, go ahead and smash the like for me. That'd be great. Get more people seeing this and get more people educated so everyone can be prepared for launch. And we're coming up on an hour and a half here, so I might call her quits here pretty soon. My mouth's getting kind of dry. I ran out of water, so I kind of need to get some liquid, but get a few more questions going here. So if you have any final questions, guys, now is the time. Get them in. Let's see here. Sweet Aussie says, I think that missing the limit order is very deliberate. Oh, it is. Definitely. If you miss the sacrifice, what would your move be at launch? How can I put this? If you missed the sacrifice, I think a strategy that not only allows you to take advantage of opportunity, but to not pretend like you're trying to outsmart the market is to have an allocation of funds that you want to put into the PulseChain ecosystem at launch. Now, you can go ahead and split this however you like in terms of percentage. And I'm going to break it up a little bit more. So you split your bag up into dollar cost average fund, which you're going to take and buy regularly. And you need to determine, obviously, how much it is, the frequency of how much you want to go in. It could be 1, 2, 3 times a week. And you could just consistently buy in. Now, the second half, and you can also split this like 60-40. So you have 60% just dollar cost averaging funds, and 40% is more for opportunistic buys. And that other half, though, is when you see a dip, you go a little bit heavier in. So you could either just add 10 or 15% to a regular DCA, a dollar cost average, or what you could do is you could even go ahead and just on another day, if it dips on an off day where you're not dollar cost averaging, you could just go ahead and make another, you can make another buy. So, but you're more timely with that, right? You're not as consistent, but you're more timely with it, right? So I think that would be a very safe way to go about it. And you don't even have to do the opportune side of things. If you don't want to watch the charts, if you don't want to watch for dips necessarily, just be consistent, just go ahead and make sure that you're consistent over the weeks or months that you want to go ahead and do that. See you guys next on the moon. I hope so, my man. Hex go yo. Hey, no problem. Thanks for being here. And I hope you learned a whole lot. Audrodamus, I don't actually know the penalty for desync as a validator. I'm not going to be running a validator. I don't have that expertise, and nor will I pretend to. We already talked about that. I don't know. I could expect. I don't know. Honestly, I'm not gonna go into this because I don't have a clue. I really don't have a clue. One other question: during the bridge, how will you be able to bridge if you don't have any PLS to pay for gas to make the trade? It's a good question. So you can go to freepulse.io. I'll bring it up here. Oh, I can't spell. Oh, God. So if you go to freepulse.io, you can go to this website. And let me just share my screen real quick here. So you can go to this website, you can connect your wallet, and then you could also go ahead and basically every single day you can roll. It's like you can roll and you can get anywhere from like 1 to I think a few hundred pulse or something like that. But you can do this every hour, right? So this is a great way for you to come to PulseChain, already get armed with Pulse tokens for free. You don't even have to pay gas. So don't even worry about it. You just come here, connect your wallet, roll, bring it to your wallet. You'll get at least one pulse every time you do this, and you will have pulse on day one. Oh, I know. PulseChain rocket fuel, a rocket. This should be called rocket fuel instead of rocket pool. A rocket fuel, rocket fuel pool. I don't know. Anyways, I don't know. Rocket fuel just sounds cool to me. So I agree, though. ICOSA being the insurance token is nuts. Yeah, everyone will get one PLS. Is that true? That's just for PLSX sacrificers. Is that not the case? I could be wrong on that one. Okay. Anyways, guys, it's been an hour and a half. I'm getting a little tired. I need to get some water. That's going to do it for me. I think that's great. That's all. Yeah, I'm going to call it there. Alex's pocket rocket. Nice. Very nice. Sweet. Okay, guys. That's it. That's all. If you haven't already, go ahead and smash the like. If you haven't subscribed, please do. I'm going to have lots more content coming out. I have a brand new office that I'm going to be able to work from the next at least couple months. So I'm going to be able to get regular content, regular streams. I am having Access Alive on stream tomorrow. We're going to go into this type of conversation, very deep dive. We're going to talk about macro stuff. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. I got a little bit of an idea of what we're going to talk about, but I kind of want to flow with it. And I think it's going to be a very, very educative or informative stream, and you're not going to want to miss out. And if you've been listening to this conversation, it confuses you and you don't really know what to do, I offer one-on-one coaching to get you ready. We talk the basics. I can get you all set up. I can show you how to do everything, and I can hold your hand the whole way through the process. If you want to do that, there's links in the description to go ahead and do that. Also, where is it? I got a book right here with crypto events that I have made. It's free on Kindle on Amazon, and it is also for also available via paperback and hard copy. And there's also a free PDF version on my website that you can go ahead and get. But that's all I got. That's all I'm going to say. And tomorrow, the stream for Axis is going to be 12 p.m. Pacific time. And I think I'll put that in the chat. Give me just 2 seconds, guys. I'm going to go to my YouTube and give you the link. Let's see. And make sure you bookmark this for tomorrow, 12 p.m. Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time. And that's it. That's all. All right, guys. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you guys tomorrow in the stream with Axis and many videos to come. Have a great evening.